My name's Alex. I'm a college student, and to make ends meet, I started working the night shift at a small convenience store downtown. It's one of those places that's open 24/7, attracting a mix of late-night snackers and people who seem like they've nowhere else to go. In the beginning, I thought the job was perfect for me. I could study during the quieter hours and the pay was decent. But there's something about being alone at night that makes everything feel different. The store, wedged between an old laundromat and a rundown apartment building, had this retro vibe to it. Neon lights flickering outside, aisles crammed with all sorts of stuff. At first I kind of liked it. The solitude gave me time to think, to study, and the rare customer breaking the monotony wasn't too bad. But things started to get weird after a few weeks. It began with small, almost ignorable incidents. I'd find things not where I left them, like a stack of magazines or cans. I shrugged it off, thinking I was just tired or that a customer had moved them. Then came the sounds, soft, subtle, like someone shuffling their feet. I'd look up, expecting to see a late visitor, but there'd be no one. I told myself it was nothing, just the byproduct of a tired mind in the early hours of the morning. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that I wasn't entirely alone. It's hard to explain, but sometimes the hair on the back of my neck would stand up, and I'd get this chill running down my spine, as if someone was watching me. I never believed much in the supernatural or anything, but those shifts started to make me question everything. I just didn't know how real things were about to get. The nights that followed turned my job at the convenience store into something I couldn't have imagined. I started noticing more oddities. One night, as I was restocking shelves, I heard the sound of a door gently closing in the back. I froze. The only door there was to the storage room, and nobody used it at this hour. I mustered the courage to check, but found nothing amiss, just rows of boxes and the faint smell of dust. I convinced myself that it was just the wind or some logical explanation that I couldn't think of at the time. But then, things escalated. It was around 2 a.m. on a particularly silent night. I was sitting behind the counter, half dozing, and that's when I heard it. A faint whisper. My eyes snapped open, and I looked around, the fluorescent lights causing stark shadows across the aisles. Nothing. I stepped out from behind the counter, my heart pounding in my chest. The store was empty, and the silence was almost deafening. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding strange in the quiet. No response. I began to walk down the aisles, my steps slow and hesitant. Every so often I'd pause, straining my ears for any sound, but all I could hear was the faint buzzing of the lights. That's when I saw it. A shadow, or what looked like one, at the end of the aisle. I blinked and it was gone. Just my imagination, I told myself. Just the trick of the light. But the unease in my gut told a different story. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that I wasn't alone. So I decided to check the security cameras, thinking that it would put my mind at ease. I rewound the footage to the time that I heard the whisper. My hand trembled slightly as I pressed play. The screen showed me, standing alone in the aisle, but then, in the corner of the frame, there was a figure, barely visible, moving at the edge of the camera's vision. It was there for only a second, and then it vanished. My mind raced. Was someone in the store with me? Hiding? Watching? I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I had to find out. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way to the back of the store, determined to uncover what was going on. With the flashlight's beam cutting through the darkness, I made my way towards the back of the store. Every step felt heavy. My mind racing with possibilities of what or who I might find. The store was silent, save for the occasional creak of the old floorboards under my feet. I reached the storage room, the place where I had heard the door close earlier. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room was as I left it, boxes of stock piled up. But something felt different. I swept the flashlight across the room, and that's when I saw it. A small gap between two large boxes, like a makeshift hiding spot. My heart skipped a beat. Was someone there? I hesitated, my hand gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. Is someone there? I called out, my voice stern. Silence was my only answer. I inched closer, the light trembling slightly in my hand. As I reached the gap, I braced myself for what I might find. But there was nothing, just an empty space and a wall. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. That's when I noticed something on the floor, partly hidden by the boxes. It was a backpack, old and worn, and it didn't belong to the store. I picked it up, my mind racing. How did this get here? Who did it belong to? And so I opened it, only to find a few personal items, a water bottle, a notepad, and a knife. The kind of knife you wouldn't carry around for any good reason. My blood ran cold. Someone had been in here, in my store, hiding in the shadows. But why? And where were they now? I realized then that it wasn't safe. I wasn't alone. I needed to get out, call the police, do something. But as I turned to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed from the front of the store, slow and deliberate. Someone was out there, in the dark, waiting. The sound of those footsteps, slow and measured, sent a wave of panic through me. I was cornered, the only exit through the main store, where someone or something was lurking. Clutching the backpack, I realized that calling the police wasn't an option, because my phone was on the counter, far from reach. I needed a plan, fast. I remembered the back door, rarely used and probably jammed, but it was my only chance. So I crept through the storage room, avoiding any noise, my heart pounding in my chest. As I neared the door, I heard the footsteps stop. Silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. I held my breath, listening, waiting, and with the push, the back door gave way, creaking loudly. I winced at the sound, certain it would give me away. I slipped through, finding myself in the narrow alley behind the store. The night air was cold, biting at my skin, but I didn't stop to think. I ran, not looking back. My only thought was to put as much distance between me and the store as possible. Once I felt safe, hidden in the shadows of the alley, I paused to catch my breath. My mind was racing. Who was in the store? Why were they there? The backpack, the knife, none of it made sense. Fear mingled with confusion. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back there alone. So I made my way to the main street and called the police from a public phone. They arrived quickly, but after searching the store, they found no one. The backpack and its contents were taken as evidence, a mystery left unsolved. They said it might have been a homeless person seeking shelter, but the knife, that suggested something more evil. As I gave my statement, the reality of what could have happened hit me. I had been lucky, incredibly lucky, but the thought of what might have lurked in the shadows, watching, waiting, sent shivers down my spine. My name is Sarah, and I'm a nurse. I've worked in many parts of the hospital over the years, but nothing quite compares to the wing where I was assigned for the night shifts. It's one of those older parts of the hospital, long corridors lined with rooms that are rarely used now, save for storage. The place has a reputation for being eerie, but I always shrugged off such talk as superstition. On my first night, I remember walking those dimly lit halls, the silence broken only by the distant beeping of machines from other wings. There was a heaviness in the air, a stillness that made me uneasy. I told myself that it was just a new environment and that I'd get used to it. But as the nights went by, I started to feel like the stories about the wing might hold some truth. Doors would close softly behind me, even when there was no draft. Once or twice, I thought I heard whispers, but when I turned around, there was never anyone there. It was unsettling, but I tried to keep my focus on my duties. I had no idea then just how strange things were about to get in that lonely wing of the hospital. As the nights unfolded, the sense of unease in the old hospital wing grew stronger. It wasn't just the quiet or the occasional odd noise anymore. Things started happening that I couldn't just brush off as my imagination. One night, I was making my rounds, checking each room, ensuring everything was in order. As I reached the end of the corridor, I heard the distinct sound of a phone ringing. It was coming from one of the rooms. This was strange because the rooms in this wing hadn't been used for patients in years. The ringing was persistent, cutting through the silence. I hesitated at the door, my hand on the knob, the ringing echoing in my ears. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room was empty. Just an old, unused patient bed and a desk with a phone on it, and that was the phone that was ringing. I approached it slowly and picked up the receiver. "Hello?" There was no response, just silence, and then the line went dead. I reported it to the maintenance team, thinking that it was just a glitch in the system. They checked it out, but they couldn't find anything wrong. They said it was probably just a one-off thing, but it wasn't. The next night, it happened again. The same room, the same ringing phone. This time, when I answered, I heard something. A faint whisper, almost inaudible, and then nothing. It left me feeling cold, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I tried to rationalize it, such as the old building, faulty wiring, anything really that made sense. But deep down, I knew that something wasn't right. That's when I started noticing the other things. Doors that I'd left open were found closed. Lights that I'd turned off were back on. It was like someone, or something, was moving through the wing with me. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, of not being alone. It was a feeling that would soon turn into a terrifying reality. The incidents grew more frequent, each night feeling more oppressive than the last. But nothing prepared me for what happened one particular evening. It was past midnight, and the wing was shrouded in an almost tangible silence. As I was walking down the corridor, checking each room, I felt it. A sudden drop in temperature. A chill that seemed to seep into my bones. I turned the corner, and there, at the far end of the hallway, I saw it. A shadow, just for a moment, moving across the wall. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart racing. There was no one else scheduled to work in this wing at night, so I called out, "Who's there?" No answer, just the echo of my own voice. Summoning every bit of courage, I moved towards where I saw the shadow. Each step felt heavier than the last. As I reached the spot, my hands trembling slightly. There was nothing there, just the cold, empty hallway, but the feeling of unease lingered, growing stronger. I quickly finished my rounds and headed back to the nurse's station, trying to shake off the fear, but the sense of being watched followed me, clinging like a second skin. That night, I realized that this was no longer just about odd noises or malfunctioning equipment. There was something else in that wing, something unexplainable and deeply unsettling. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I started looking into the file of the old hospital wing. I talked to older staff members, dug through old records, and what I found sent chills down my spine. The wing used to house patients with severe psychiatric disorders, and it was notorious for its poor conditions and treatment methods. There were stories of patients who had mysteriously disappeared, never to be found, and whispers of mistreatment and despair. One account in particular stood out: a patient who had vanished without a trace, rumored to have been seen in the hallway, the very hallway where I experienced those occurrences. The story was hushed up, buried in the past, but it lingered like a dark shadow over the wing. These revelations shed a new light on everything I had just experienced. The cold spots, the whispers, the feeling of being watched. It all seemed to connect back to the wing's troubled past. But knowing this only deepened the unease that had taken root in my mind. The knowledge of the wing's history weighed heavily on me. Each shift became a test of my nerves, the once familiar corridors now echoing with the hidden stories of the past. I just couldn't look at the empty rooms without imagining the secrets they held, the untold stories of those who once occupied them. It reached a point where I had to make a decision. The job was important to me, but so was my peace of mind. Eventually, I requested a transfer to another part of the hospital. The night I left the wing for the last time, I felt a mix of relief and sadness, a chapter of my life closing. I still think about that wing, the unexplained occurrences and the shadows in the hallway. They remind me that sometimes the most haunting horrors are those rooted in reality, in the echoes of a troubled past that refuse to be silenced. My name is Jake, and I'm a security guard working the night shift at a large building. It's a solitary job, walking through empty halls, the silence only being broken by the occasional hum of the AC. The building, with its darkened offices and unlit corridors, always had an eerie feel to it after hours. I had gotten used to the quietness of the night. There was something almost peaceful about it, being alone with just my thoughts and the shadows. But the peace was shattered one night, when the routine I had come to know so well was disrupted by a series of unsettling events. What I thought was just another quiet night shift turned into something much more sinister, something that made me question the very nature of my job and the safety it entailed. The night started off like any other. I was making my rounds with my flashlight, just going through the motions. But then, things got weird. First, it was a door, one of those heavy ones that you definitely remember closing. It was wide open. I thought maybe I'd forgotten it or something, or maybe some late worker had left it that way. So I shrugged it off, closed it, and moved on. But then, lights started flickering on and off in the offices as I passed by. I know these lights are motion activated, but these rooms were empty. I checked, trust me, walking into a pitch black room and having the lights suddenly blaze on, not exactly fun. I was starting to feel on edge now. The empty building seemed to take on a different vibe. Every sound was amplified, like the creak of a door and the faint buzz of a computer left on. And then, the noises started. Tapping sounds, like someone drumming their fingers on a desk, coming from different offices as I passed. But every time I checked, there was nothing, not a soul. I tried to laugh it off, tell myself that I was just being jumpy, but deep down, I knew something was up. This wasn't just my imagination running wild. Someone or something was messing with me, and I was about to find out what. My nerves were already on edge when it happened. I was halfway through the third floor when I heard it. A clear, unmistakable sound of footsteps above me. Someone was definitely here. This wasn't just some weird light show or my mind playing tricks. I bolted up the stairs, 2 steps at a time, my heart pounding. I reached the 4th floor, and there they were. A figure, halfway down the corridor, back turned to me, rummaging through a desk. I didn't think, I just acted. "Hey," I shouted, my flashlight beam fixated on them. They froze and then bolted. I was right behind them, my adrenaline pumping through my veins. I chased him down, and I was close, almost close enough to grab them, when they suddenly stopped and turned. Our eyes met, and in that moment I saw it. It was just a kid, no older than 19, looking like he'd made a huge mistake. His hands were shaking, and he was shaking, hands up in surrender. I grabbed my radio and called it in, keeping an eye on him. Turns out, he was just a local teen who had been dared to sneak into the building by his friends. A stupid prank that went too far. When the police showed up, they took him away, lecturing him about the seriousness of his actions and calling his parents. The relief I felt was overwhelming, but it was mixed with a strange sense of pity for the kid. The building was cleared, and I finished my shift. The night's excitement left a lasting impression. That night changed how I saw my job. It wasn't just about patrolling the quiet halls anymore. It was about expecting the unexpected. Even though the kid was harmless, it could have ended way different. And it made me realize that a sense of security can be shattered in an instant, and sometimes the threat isn't supernatural or dramatic. It's real.